I do on Far Cry 2? Well, the narrative designer, this is a role that, I mean, I don't want to claim like we invented it. I mean, I know lots of folks who work in the game industry who are story designers or narrative designers, but often it means different things depending on the kind of game. In the case of Far Cry 2, Far Cry 2 is an open world game. It's a rather large open world game. It's ambitious, and one of the things that we wanted to try to do was figure out a story strategy that would really map well to the fact that the player is given a lot of choice and a lot of freedom and the ability to kind of go wherever they want and to tackle the different missions of the game in different orders and to really affect the outcome of the game as a whole through their gameplay by running around and shooting. So that meant that we couldn't just have a sort of conventional linear narrative that was grafted onto the game, because really we don't know what the player is going to do. We don't know how they're going to take their approach. We don't know what kinds of missions they're going to want to do. So we couldn't have a story that was so locked in and so engraved in stone in terms of how it was going to unfold that the player was constantly being forced into these sort of bottlenecks in order to see a cutscene or something that would tell them how the story was progressing. That meant we needed to do something which we call sort of dynamically sort of procedurally managed narrative, right? The idea that the story is being assembled on the fly by the game systems, depending on what the player's doing in the game. So that's a roundabout way of saying that my job has been to work as part of the game design team, first and foremost, to make sure that that story progression is really built into the gameplay experience, that it's not something that's kind of sitting off in a parallel world from the rest of the game, but that it's completely integrated and that the player feels like when they're playing the game, they're playing the story. We need to be moving away from this idea that the story is something that we kind of impose on the player and impose on the gameplay experience, and be willing to kind of let go of that authorial control and make the story something that the player creates for themselves. Obviously, we give the player the pieces. We provide him with characters, we provide him with a situation, a conflict, a setting, all the things that need to be there in order to have a story. But what we're saying is that it's the player's actions, the player's choices in the game that are causing the story to come together in a recognizable way that feels like a narrative, that feels like an adventure, that feels like the player's kind of own personal journey. GDC, for people who've never had a chance to attend it, is, I mean, it's certainly right now the largest of the kind of game developer events, and it has the reputation of turning into kind of just a big networking schmoozathon sometimes, and I've certainly seen that. But at the same time, there's a ton of really good information there. I mean, the conference itself encompasses both the sorts of lectures and talks like the ones that I'm doing, but also for the first 2 days there's intensive workshops in all the major fields of game development. So for me personally, the thing that I'm going to be looking forward to is attending. There's a game design and workshop that's a 2-day tutorial that takes place on the Monday and Tuesday of it, and that's something that I've been hearing about for a while. The people who are involved with it are great. They always try to bring in some pretty top-notch designers to come in as sort of the instructors for it, and it seems like a really interesting and challenging way to kind of test your game design muscles and do it in a kind of fast way. So I'm looking forward to that. This year there seems to be a ton of talks on narrative design in general. I know that there's going to be some great stuff from the guys that developed BioShock, and that's always interesting to me to be able to kind of see how other developers have approached similar problems. I got to go to Leipzig for the game convention in Germany, and while it has a few things in common with E3 just in terms of the scope of it, I was blown away. I mean, I was so impressed by how intensely excited all of the European fans were who attended. And we had fans who'd driven all the way across Europe, people who'd come in from Russia and from every corner of the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe as well as Western Europe and the British Isles and whatnot. And I mean, and what impressed me the most was how much of a family event it was, how mass market it was, how accessible it was. You'd see middle-aged couples walking in there without kids. You'd see whole families with little kids. Like a really different attitude, and it was kind of neat to see it, and neat to see what other kinds of games are doing well in the European market. For us as Far Cry, going there and going to Germany, which is like the home of the original Far Cry, kind of stepping into Crytek's turf right when CRYSIS was kind of hitting the forefront of everyone's awareness, and it was really neat for us to both be there and see each other's games and even talk to their developers, and we kind of realized, you know what, we're two different games totally, and that's actually really cool. what's impressed me, just strictly even from just the technology and from the graphical values of the game, has been that, you know, we showed our kind of initial demo at Leipzig last summer, summer of 2007, and it was impressive, and everybody looked at it and went, wow, this looks really, really good. And having worked on it for a couple years before that, you know, I knew how far we had come, and it was really neat to see that. By November, when we had produced the next set of kind of demos that we showed to the press and to the distributors in Europe and North America, the quality had been raised so much more that when we looked at the Leipzig demo, it was almost like, ooh, you know, like, should we, you know, I mean, it still looks amazing, but we're like, oh man, but it doesn't have this, and it doesn't have this, and it doesn't have this. And honestly, like, even knowing now what the team has been up to in terms of how they've been optimizing the game world and optimizing the streaming and making the graphics work and making, you know, all this stuff, plus all of the new AI features, the new AI behaviors, all of the new kind of dynamic story elements that I've been talking about, knowing that stuff is coming, seeing some of the stuff that's been implemented since then, I'm just blown away. Like, the game just keeps getting better. And every new build has some new, new revelation for those of us who maybe haven't been directly involved with that particular piece of it. And that's amazing.